In a world where magic is everything, and mages are the kings of all adventurers, someone with only physical strength like Win is just a side character. However, the problem is that the author of this very world was reincarnated as Win and used his knowledge of this world to turn the table step by step, becoming the one who fights alongside the world's main character. What is the life of an incredibly overpowered mage like? Well, let's follow along with Pi and find out. In a scene of shattered space-time, a big-headed flying guy is exchanging moves with a young boy. That guy proclaims himself a god and says the boy named Alan can't stop him from reversing this world. But Alan declares he shouldn't celebrate too soon, as he won't let that guy do as he pleases. The self-proclaimed supreme god, not wanting to be hindered by Alan, launches an incredibly terrifying attack at the boy. But Alan is no pushover either, swinging his sword to split the attack in two, then pushes off and flies up to face the god. This incredibly dramatic scene of a child fighting with an adult turns out to be an anime being shown on a large screen in a public square. It's a hit of the era, a novel set in a world of swords and magic. The novel about the hero Alan is so popular that it has been milked and adapted into all sorts of media, from anime to games. And behind the creation of this world-class novel is a frail and sickly man. It seems he has contracted some incurable disease, so he no longer clings to life. His current noble goal is to finish his sensational novel at all costs, despite his assistant's earnest advice that the author should get treatment to prolong his life. He feels he cannot waste time on that. The man is determined to finish his work with his own hands, even if it costs him his life. The assistant knows he can't persuade the author, so he can only go along with him and stay by his side, taking care of his every need. The author burns the last of his life force and completes his life's work. He has no more regrets, only hoping that everyone will enjoy his work, even if just a little. But who would have thought the author didn't die at all? Or to be more precise, he was reincarnated. He slowly walks past a mirror, then is startled to realize he has been reincarnated as the young boy Win. Win is a side character in the author's novel. According to the original story, Win has mediocre abilities, but his personality is undeniably wicked. The author quickly checks his surroundings and realizes he is in the Campbell family mansion. And if the plot remains unchanged, the Campbell family will soon collapse due to the terrible things they've done. However, since the author has been reincarnated and given a new life, he must correct the mistakes to prevent the Campbell family from falling apart. In addition, he also has the goal of saving a character who is destined to be sacrificed in the original storyline. Although this character, Win, has no outstanding talents, the person now controlling this body is the one who created this entire world. So nothing can be too difficult for Win. On the day of the entrance exam for the Celia Magic Academy, Win's father instructed him to get into the school at all costs. Win promises that getting into Celia is not a problem. The problem is that his father should stop the family's dirty, illegal business. Win's father's eyes widen, surprised that his son knows about these things. But what is there that the original author wouldn't know? Win warns that if the illegal business doesn't stop, the Campbell family will be left with nothing at all. However, his father doesn't agree right away and just says he will think about it. Win sets off for the Celia Academy exam location, but he actually has no information about this exam. Besides, to be able to use magic exceptionally, Win needs to obtain the Sorcerer's Ring from the ancient ruins. Just then, the carriage carrying Win is attacked, causing it to shake violently and throwing him outside. To his surprise, a gigantic red dragon suddenly appears right before his eyes. Win is at a loss for words. For a massive red dragon to suddenly appear like this, it's clear that in the original plot, there was no such event as this. Could Win's new life end so quickly? There's no way he can escape this thing by running. The only way is to fight the red dragon to the death to find a path to survival. Win knows the characteristics of a red dragon like the back of his hand, but the problem is he doesn't have enough strength to take it down, so his knowledge is useless. Just then, a figure flashes past Win, then directly attacks the red dragon within. I shadow attack. Win didn't expect to meet this person so soon. He is the main character of the original story, the Hero Alan. Although Alan made a pretty cool entrance, the problem is his damage output isn't high enough, so he still can't do anything to the Red Dragon. It's true that at this point, since Alan hasn't awakened yet, he can't defeat the Red Dragon, but with Win here, nothing is. Impossible. Alan says he already told the carriage driver to call for reinforcements, so they just need to hold out until help arrives to be safe. But Win has no intention of doing that. He wants to persuade Alan to team up with him and take down that Red Dragon. There's a plan, but the current situation doesn't allow Win to explain much, so he just needs Alan to follow his instructions. Win will go out and provoke the Red Dragon, while Alan will look for an opportunity to attack its wings. A Red Dragon is not invincible. It still has a weak point, the Fire Dragon core, located right in the middle of its chest. As long as they can destroy the Fire Dragon core, the dragon slaying mission will be a complete success. Actually, the character Win isn't completely useless. He has a hidden plot point never revealed in the original story. Physical strength far greater than an ordinary person's. If this wasn't a world where magic is supreme, Win would have become the greatest person, not Alan. At this moment, the Red Dragon roars and spreads its wings too. Look cool, which fits perfectly into Win's plan. Win signals Alan to continuously cast magic, to freeze the Red Dragon's wings, while he moves like the wind with his sword, continuously attacking the dragon. With movement patterns exactly like those established in the game adaptation, the Red Dragon cannot outsmart Win. But a game that's too easy is no fun. The Red Dragon suddenly sets its tail on fire, then whips it forcefully towards Win, wrecking him. Seeing his comrade getting beaten up, Alan becomes extremely worried, and in this critical moment he awakens his true power. Win is losing too much blood. Could it be that his new, reincarnated life will be cut short right here? But Alan says there's no way that's happening. He will save Win and deal with this Red Dragon thing. Win looks at Alan's current state and is startled. It's clear the boy has activated a high-level magic state. The Red Dragon roars in fury and then spews out a stream of scorching flames straight at Win. It must still hold a grudge for Win's earlier slashes. At the same time, Alan counters with his absolute zero skill. The power of Alan's skill far surpasses anything the Red Dragon can produce, extinguishing its flames instantly. Not only that, the Red Dragon's entire body is encased in ice, becoming a gigantic ice block. Win is certain that at this point, Alan hasn't fully awakened his power, but according to the original story he wrote, it's entirely possible for Alan to release his energy early. Alan's miraculous outburst wasn't for his own sake, but to save Win for the sake of another. His awakening this early will have a huge impact on the future storyline. At this point, Alan has also returned to his normal state. He looks at the giant block of ice encasing the Red Dragon, unable to believe he created it. But now is not the time to be dazed. Alan immediately turns his attention to Win to see if he's okay. Only now do the reinforcements arrive on horseback. The knights charge in enthusiastically, but there's no need for them anymore. The Red Dragon has already been dealt with. But at least with their arrival, Win received timely treatment, and the Red Dragon, their spoil of war, was also brought back, since Win and Alan couldn't have carried it alone. On the carriage heading towards the city, Alan considerately asks if Win is okay, but Win is the reincarnated author, so of course he's fine. There's another problem. How did Win know Alan's name when he hadn't even formally introduced himself? Win realizes he's dug his own grave with that slip of the tongue. The situation earlier was so tense that he let slip. Luckily, Alan has no memories of his childhood, so with the mind of the original author, Win can make up any story he wants. Win explains that as a child, he lived in a village east of Celia, and Alan looks a lot like a childhood friend of his. And just like that, Alan believes him completely. How could he possibly expose the author's lie, right? Alan could only assume he was the childhood friend Win mentioned, because he had no memories of his childhood at all. Win just had to go with the flow, acting happy and grateful to be reunited with his friend, especially since his friend had also saved his life. In the future, Win would surely exploit his friendship with Alan a lot to accompany him. As soon as Win and Alan brought the Red Dragon's corpse to the capital, someone immediately approached them and offered a high price to buy it. Alan seemed flustered by suddenly obtaining such a large sum of money, but Win advised him not to worry, saying Alan deserved this money. and Alan was very kind-hearted, directly giving Wynne half of it. Wynne certainly didn't turn down the money. With this initial capital, the plan to obtain the witch's ring would have a much higher chance of success. Alan thought Wynne would take the entrance exam for the Celia Magic Academy with him, but Wynne had no such intention yet. Wynne still had to prepare a bit more before entering that academy. Before leaving, Wynne left Alan with a friendly reminder. Obviously, when Alan used magic, its destructive power was incredibly overwhelming, but Alan had trouble controlling this flow of power. Wynne reminded him that if Alan could just focus his magic on a single point, he could develop by leaps and bounds. Magic is activated by ensuring one's magical power flows properly into the magic circuits within the body. This was a small hint for Alan to develop beyond the original storyline. Although Wynne acted as if this wasn't very important and didn't specifically urge Alan to follow it, Alan affirmed that he would study this matter carefully. After saying goodbye to Alan, Wynne had to exclaim that Alan was truly a good person, a purely good person at that, while Wynne was reviewing his own plan. One more time, a carriage happened to pass by, startling him and making him turn to look. The person in the carriage was Princess Selena, the one who would die according to the original story, and also the person Wynne wanted to save. At the present time, Wynne couldn't even get an audience with Selena, but he was determined to become stronger in order to be able to save her. Wynne went straight to the capital's slums, a place where the poor lived and which the capital did not govern. This place could be said to be the source of crime, opium, and prostitution. Wynne came here to cooperate with someone. However, at this moment, some blind fools showed up, wanting to rob Wynne. Seeing the thugs rush forward to gang up on him, Wynne just let out a light scoff. Although he had no talent for magic, he still met the standards to enter the academy. Very quickly, the thugs were beaten senseless and left sprawling on the ground. The one still unharmed tucked his tail and ran for his life. Wynne went straight to a house that looked like that of a fortune teller and directly requested the help of the girl sitting behind the table. This girl was not only the operator of the guilds in the slums, but also an elf. According to what Wynne had written in this work, the girl named Nora would be the information provider whom Alan would later rely on heavily. To make an impression on Nora, Wynne declared that he was even more knowledgeable than an information broker like her. Nora stated that if Wynne could surprise her, she would listen to his request completely free of charge. Wynne had hit the jackpot. He revealed in one go Nora's true identity as a GAC net, and that she was 180 years old. She left the elves because she was tired of the conservative customs of her homeland. Nora disguised herself as a human and blended into the slums, using wind magic to eavesdrop on all sorts of matters to serve her information brokering business. That's not all. Wynne even knew Nora's 3 measurements like the back of his hand, making her feel as if he had stripped her naked and inspected her from head to toe. Nora had definitely lost the bet, and she had to fulfill her promise to guide Wynne. Nora didn't understand what someone as knowledgeable as Wynne would need her for, but this was a task that couldn't be done without Nora. Wynne needed Nora to lead him to her homeland, the elf forest. In the dark of night, Nora drove a carriage, taking Wynne deep into the forest. Surprisingly, the trees here were all withered, unlike in Nora's memory. Wynne said that the reason he was heading to the elf forest was precisely because of this phenomenon of withered trees. As for the details, Nora would just have to wait and see. This made Nora extremely curious and uncomfortable, but she couldn't force Wynne to tell her. They quickly reached the border wall of the elf forest. The guards outside shouted loudly that if they weren't elves, they should get lost immediately. But while they might chase away others, the elves wouldn't dare to chase away Nora, who had deigned to return to the tribe. Nora also vouched for Wynne, saying he was her friend and should be allowed to pass. The guards didn't dare to object any further, hastily opening the gate to welcome Nora back to her homeland right away. Nora's return made countless elf children extremely excited. They must have missed her a lot. Although Nora had shown her distaste for the elf village's customs and run away from home, no one had any objections to her. Because she was the princess of the elf tribe, Nora wanted to know what Wynne wanted to do next, and he directly stated he wanted to meet the village chief to discuss an important matter. The village chief was very happy that Nora had returned, but he was very displeased that she had brought a human into the elf territory. However, Neither Nora nor Win paid any attention to what the old chief said, making the old man's blood pressure skyrocket. The old man got sulky and immediately tried to kick Win out without wanting to hear a single word from him. But was the old man so sure? Win had come to solve the unusual problem happening in the forest, the very problem that the elf tribe had been racking their brains over without a solution. Win stated bluntly that the wind spirit in the forest was becoming aggressive, causing the atmosphere in the forest to become chaotic, which is why the trees were all withering. Clearly, the elf chief didn't know what to do, and he was already considering resorting to a sacrifice to see if it would work. This old elf was quite imaginative, immediately accusing Win of being the culprit behind this unusual disturbance. But in a way, he had guessed correctly. It was indeed because the original author, now living in Win's body, had written this unusual event into existence. But of course, Win wasn't going to take the blame for creating this mess. On the contrary, he proclaimed himself to be a messenger sent by God to save the elf tribe. Win explained that God could not intervene directly, so he had instructed Win to act on his behalf, which was why he knew so much. Hearing this, the elf chief believed him completely, as the news that God still cared for them was incredibly good news for the elf tribe. Win said that his current power was not enough to appease the wind spirit, so he needed to borrow two of the elf tribe's treasures, the spirit mirror and the fairy bell, for support. How could the elf chief refuse this life or death proposal? But he had one small condition. The condition wasn't difficult. It was just to have another elf besides Nora supervise Win. The elf accompanying Win's group was San. According to Nora, they used to play together about 100 years ago. Although San didn't appear in the original story, she was a rather talented character. The main reason San was the supervisor was to become a scapegoat in case Win failed. She had already mentally prepared herself for death. As long as she could save the elf forest, she wouldn't hesitate. But with Win here, San wouldn't get the chance to offer herself up to be killed. Just then, a powerful stream of magic suddenly attacked Win's group. Luckily, he reacted quickly and immediately pulled out the spirit mirror to reflect the attack. With him here, everything would be resolved just fine. Win realized the recent attack came from the wind spirit, but this place was still a long way from the center of the spirit forest. Perhaps it had wandered out here due to the incident. Nora and San were a bit spooked that the wind spirit had appeared here, but Win was very happy to welcome it, as this would save him the trouble of going far. The wind spirit revealed its true form as a giant harpy named Jean. Then, without hesitation, it flapped its wings behind it, creating two wind blades that slashed towards Win. Facing the attack aimed at him, Win just gave a faint smile, then swung the spirit mirror in his hand to the right, angled to reflect the wind blade attack right back at Jean. Jean saw that its long-range magic attacks were ineffective and immediately teleported closer, wanting to peck a lump on Win's head with its beak. Win calmly and easily dodged and felt that Jean wasn't so confused as to have lost all reason, still knowing to change its attack method when its strikes were ineffective. If Jean wasn't going to use magic to attack, then Win also had to get more serious. He took out a short sword from behind his back, then chanted a spell to activate the flames on its blade, and slashed out. The short sword Win had just pulled out was a fire magic short sword, a bargain that Win had hunted down in the slum's black market. And although Jin's wind magic seemed a bit frightening, its close combat ability was nothing special. So Win was still confident he could pluck Jin's feathers as easily as eating a cake. Moreover, Jin's was currently clouded by rage, making its movements even more predictable. If Win just hammered Jin's weak points, he would definitely win the fight. Win charged straight at Jin, but immediately gathered momentum, leaped up, and then stabbed his sword into its back. The fatal blow made Jin scream in pain, and at the same time, the flames from Win's sword flared up violently, as if to turn Jin into a roasted bird. That's not all. Win then pulled a chain from his person and tied the creature Jin up tightly to make roasting him easier. That chain was also a magic item called the fire chain. All the items Win used were of the fire element, because it was a hard counter to Jin. As expected, having knowledge of this entire world is indeed Win's greatest weapon. After confirming that Jin was restrained, San let out a sigh of relief and burst into tears. If Win hadn't intervened, she would have become a sacrifice to the wind spirit today or tomorrow in hopes of appeasing its wrath. Although Jin still hadn't come to his senses. Yet, with the bell in Win's hand, this guy would be done for in no time. Hearing the awakening bell, Jean was no longer in a blind rage, but became clear-headed again and was able to speak. Although the language of spirits can only be understood by spirits of an equal or higher rank, Win is an exception. After all, he was the one who created this language. Jean expressed immense gratitude for Win knocking some sense back into him. But Win didn't need such trivial thanks. He wanted to establish a contract with Jean. He just needed to be able to use spirit magic. And Jean quickly agreed to this request. A pure stream of energy flooded into Win's body, allowing him to successfully form the contract and use spirit magic. Win didn't hide the fact that he could now use spirit magic. He said that he learned it while saving the forest. Nora was very suspicious of Win's explanation, because spirit magic was something only an elf elder could learn, yet a human like Win learned it in a flash. Sin didn't care about such minor details. At this point, she just thought Win was cool as hell. Seeing Win's group return after being gone for only a short while, the elf elder was very suspicious and wondered if he had really solved the problem. Win affirmed that he had calmed Jin's wrath. But the trees were still withered, which was why the old village chief was so hesitant. Geez, it's not like the trees drank some magic potion to grow back instantly. But seeing the village chief's impatience, Win felt a bit sorry for him, so he decided to perform a super gross stimulation just this once. Win snapped his fingers and summoned the spirit Jean. Immediately, a small whirlwind swirled in the middle of the clearing. Then the large chicken, Jean, appeared, causing the entire elf tribe to stare wide-eyed. Win wanted Jean to use magic to revive the forest. If it's this, Jean can do it. Jean immediately cast a spell, causing the entire withered forest to suddenly light up with specks of blue-green light. Following that, they began to sprout lush green leaves again as if nothing had ever happened. Win thanked Jean for reviving the forest, not forgetting to remind Jean to stabilize the chaos in the ley lines. Only then would the situation be completely stable. After Jean left, the elf elder trembled with excitement, then shouted at the top of his lungs, declaring Win as the savior of the entire elf tribe. He ordered everyone to prepare a feast immediately. They must treat the savior of the elf tribe to a lavish reception. Because the danger had passed, all the elves once again laughed and joked around happily, hanging up lanterns and flowers and all sorts of things. San, standing beside Win, bowed her head and thanked him sincerely. If it weren't for Win, her number would have been up by now. Win didn't want to dwell on the matter. It wasn't a big deal to him. So, he said to put it all aside and eat first, then they'd figure things out. Elf culture rarely accepts other races, but as a savior and an honored guest, Win was no longer an outsider. In any case, saving the elf forest was a necessary part of the main storyline, but Win had to admit that receiving the gratitude of the elf tribe was a wonderful thing. With this, the future developments of the world would change drastically compared to the original story. But Win really looked forward to this change. The next day, a short while after leaving the elf village, Win suggested that he would go on his own from here. Nora still wanted to escort Win all the way to his destination as a way to thank him for what he did for the elf tribe. But Win suggested it would be better for her to return to the capital and continue her intelligence business. Another reason was that Win had San with him now, so he wouldn't be lonely. Although leaving the elf village made San a little sad, it was thanks to Win that she could continue to live. Therefore, she decided to dedicate her life to supporting Win to repay this debt of gratitude. To put it simply, she had already dedicated her life to Win. Win was also happy to have San accompany him. He knew for sure that she had immense potential in this world. Now Win could focus on his main objective, which was the witch's battle ring. Because the witch's ring was a holy relic that was still buried inside ruins on another continent, Win needed to get on a ship and set sail to reach his destination. Stepping onto the ship, San immediately looked around everywhere, exploring. After all, she had never left the elf forest before. Well, to be precise, Win had never experienced these things either. While waiting for the ship to set sail, Win overheard that there was a B-rank adventurer on board, and everyone was sighing in relief because this trip had someone to carry the team. Come to think of it, B rank in this world was already very strong, considered top tier among adventurers. Above B rank were A and S ranks, but those master and challenger level guys were incredibly rare. Win was free anyway, so he dragged San along to check out what that B-rank adventurer looked like. That guy over there was a mage, and he confidently declared that with his superior skills, the monsters in the open sea were nothing. The crowd was in an uproar of amazement watching the adventurer show off his skills. Only Win's expression didn't change at all, which caught the adventurer's attention. He asked if Win was an adventurer, but when he heard Win say that he was just an ordinary passenger, he showed a look of open contempt. This didn't bother Win, because his own his author's brain had built the image of adventurers to be like this. So, as long as that guy could keep the ship safe, Win wouldn't bother arguing with him. Right now, Win had a more pressing problem to worry about than that. Adventurer, which was that San was seasick. He kindly asked after San for a bit, then took out some medicine for her to drink to prevent her from throwing up. The other passengers on the ship heard that the adventurer was about to fight a monster, so they went in a crowd to watch. San, being considerate, told Win to go watch too and not to worry about her, but Win wasn't in a hurry. Win changed the subject to San's potential to make her feel less tired. Win affirmed that San was a rare talent, superior to all other elves. There are two types of people who can't use magic. The first is not having magic circuits in their body, and Win was this type. The second type doesn't know how to use their magic circuits, and San was this type. She couldn't get a firm grasp on her own magic circuits. Win could say this with certainty because the compass in his hand was pointing straight at San. It was a magic compass. It only points towards something or someone who possesses powerful magic. San was an unpolished gem, and Win would train her talent. As soon as San's seasickness disappeared, they would get right to it while the iron was hot. Very quickly, 4 days had passed on Win and San's journey across the Great Sea. All in all, the trip was still going very smoothly. The B-rank adventurer, Dominic, on the ship had made mincemeat of every monster from the Great Sea that tried to attack the ship. Although this guy's personality was a bit annoying, at least he was competent, so Win just turned a blind eye. During this time, Win spent most of his time training San to use her magic circuits. But this couldn't be completed overnight. San could only channel her magic for a few minutes before she would collapse onto the bed, panting. But San's progress was incredibly clear. After only 3 attempts at channeling magic, she had increased her maintenance time from 1 minute to 5 minutes. This was also a dose of encouragement for San to keep striving. She needed to get stronger as quickly as possible to be able to help Win. It could be said that San's growth rate was dizzyingly fast. Win just hoped that in the future, when San became overpowered, she would still be on his side. Just then, the ship suddenly shook violently. Something ominous was definitely approaching. On the ship's deck, all the passengers were running for their lives in a panic because of the appearance of a supersized water dragon. Some other optimistic folks thought that this thing was no big deal, that the adventurer Dominic would take care of it all. This heartless bunch even made a please go ahead gesture, giving the whole stage to Dominic to perform. On the outside, Dominic still had to keep up appearances by boasting. But inside, he was already crying for his mommy and daddy. The water dragon before him was an A-rank monster. There was no way a B-rank mage like him could defeat it single-handedly. But the crowd cheering from behind didn't know a damn thing. They thought there was nothing Dominic couldn't do. At least Dominic was thinking about the ship. If he didn't act, the ship would be torn to shreds by the sea dragon. He immediately brandished the magic staff in his hand, launching a lightning attack at the sea dragon. The sea dragon didn't dodge or evade, letting the attack hit it straight in the face, which made Dominic quite confident. But that was only because the sea dragon couldn't be bothered to dodge. After Dominic's attack, it was completely unscathed at all, only becoming even more enraged as it locked its sights on Dominic. Seeing the beast in front of him preparing to attack, Dominic immediately erected a barrier of lightning to defend himself. But the difference in power was too great. The sea dragon's suffocating breath attack easily pierced through Dominic's shield, then sent him flying backward. The cheerleaders were still clueless, nodding to each other that Dominic was getting his ass handed to him by the sea dragon. It took them 5 seconds to understand the problem, which was that if Dominic was defeated, the ship was definitely screwed. Dominic couldn't run in time and sat on the floor, preparing to be taken out by the sea dragon's next attack. But this guy was still very lucky. There was still one big shot on the boat who had yet to act. and that was Win. He summoned the wind spirit Jin to protect Dominic and declared that he would play with this thing next. Dominic didn't believe Win could do anything to that sea dragon, but Win just told him to keep his eyes peeled and watch the show. He also asked Sand to observe the battle carefully, to expand her understanding of how to use magic arts. Next up would be an epic showdown between the two-armed Yanghua riding his divine condor versus the sea dragon, aka the terrifying version of a sea worm. Seeing the duo of Win and Jin appear, the sea dragon didn't eagerly jump into the fight, but instead turned and dove straight into the sea. It intended to pull Win's group into a battlefield advantageous to it, and if Win didn't handle it quickly, the ship would be smashed to smithereens by the sea dragon. Win ordered his brother Condor Jin to let him ride on its back, then flew into the air for a better combat position. To draw the sea dragon's attention to himself, Win used spirit magic to unleash a barrage of wind bullets, firing them all over the water. This attack was truly effective. The sea dragon shifted its attention to Win's group and shot up from the water surface. It fired a water jet attack towards Win's group, and he ordered Jin to put up a shield to block the attack. Seeing that the attack couldn't touch Win, the cunning sea dragon dove back into the sea once more. Although the sea dragon's attack hadn't truly succeeded, its destructive power had already caused the shield created by Jin to crack all over. If they continued to fight a war of attrition like this, there was no way the brother Condor could hold out. Win also knew the situation was not in his favor. If he wanted to win this battle, he needed to destroy the dragon magic core as soon as possible. Watching Win and the sea dragon fight so dramatically made Dominic's hands itch. After all, he was a B-rank adventurer. He couldn't just stand by and watch. He had to at least deal some damage to the sea dragon to get a piece of the credit. Win noticed Dominic's action, but couldn't stop him in time. The guy had already poured all his magic power into a lightning plus attack aimed straight at the sea dragon. This disruptive move annoyed the sea dragon, and it ignored the divine Condor hero duo, diving into the sea to find a chance to deal with Dominic first. Now Win had to clean up the mess Dominic had created, otherwise he would endanger the entire ship. Win instructed Jin that as soon as he gave the signal, it must fly straight towards the ship immediately, then told everyone to hold on to the ship tightly. If you get thrown off, it's on you. The sea dragon gathered power deep in the sea and then shot straight towards the bottom of the ship. At the same time, Win also ordered Jin to act. The ship, pushed by Jin first, flew straight up into the air before the sea dragon could ram it, making the sea dragon, which had rushed to the spot, completely baffled when it couldn't find its target anymore. And because this sea dragon emerged from the sea with its back turned to Win, it exposed its dragon magic core. So it would be a waste if Win didn't seize this opportunity. He immediately launched a cannon attack towards the sea dragon, shattering its dragon magic core and sending this thing to meet its ancestors. Win had to admit that thanks to Dominic acting as bait, he was able to take the chance to finish this thing off. Everyone on the ship cried tears of joy for having escaped disaster. If Win hadn't stepped in, the whole lot of them would probably be floating around in the sea dragon's stomach by now. A day after sending the sea dragon to its grave, Win and Sand finally arrived at the Ulysses continent. Setting foot on solid ground made Win and Sand feel much more comfortable. After all, neither of them were sailors. The passengers on the ship continuously acted subservient, flattering Win for having saved the entire ship. Then they even competed to invite Win to partner with their shops. Win just watched these merchants fight amongst themselves without showing any reaction. After all, that wasn't his priority. At this moment, Dominic also came over. He wanted to apologize to Win for his rude attitude when they first met. Win didn't quite understand. There was nothing to apologize for, as he didn't really care much about it anyway. But for Dominic, this was a big lesson. He knew that after this, he needed to be more humble. And the way Win humbly treated it all as no big deal really made Dominic feel like he was a well-trained young nobleman. Well, it's true that Win is a noble, but whether he was well-trained or not is not so certain. After it was just Win and Sand, she admitted that although Dominic was annoying to look at first, it turned out this guy wasn't so bad after all. Win acknowledged that Dominic was a rare type among adventurers. Perhaps because his class is a mage who has to read and understand widely, he was also more educated than most of his colleagues. When it came to adventurers, Wynn knew them like the back of his hand, because he had built them all up himself. The next destination for Wynn's group would be the item shop. They needed to prepare some things for their journey on this continent. Wynn led San straight to an old house, tucked away deep in a secluded area. San felt confused. There was clearly a much more presentable item merchant on the way, yet Wynn walked straight to this shabby place. Wynn entered the shop, then frankly introduced himself to the shopkeeper as a newcomer, just strolling around for the first time. The bald shopkeeper uncle didn't care much about Wynn's background. He let him take whatever he wanted as long as he paid in full. Wynn didn't necessarily have to buy the items in this shop. His purpose for coming here was for the shopkeeper's skill. He wanted the shopkeeper to make him an item bag. It was a bag that could hold more items than usual, created by magic. This shopkeeper was a wizard capable of creating that bag. In the past, the uncle was always sought after by adventurers to enchant their equipment. But due to internal conflicts, this uncle retired from his career early and became an ordinary general store owner. It was clear that this uncle didn't want to make an item bag for Wynn, but that was fine. Wynn just needed to borrow the magic tools. Wynn easily paid 1 gold coin for the rental fee, then picked out the materials and crafted the item bag himself. The uncle didn't believe Wynn could do it, so he made a bet that if Wynn could do it, he would give him an item as a gift. The uncle took Wynn into the room containing the magic tools to see how he would perform. The act of enchanting could actually be done by anyone, as long as they knew the correct incantation. This was extremely easy for the author of this world. Wynn only needed to make a few basic strokes, and the item bag was completed. This made the uncle truly unable to believe his eyes. The shopkeeper uncle absolutely could not understand how Wynn was able to create the item bag. Although it wasn't difficult, the number of people who knew how was very small. By now, Wynn had gotten the item bag, so he took San to the market to prepare some necessary tools for their journey. This place was also a very new place for San. She had never been to places like this before. If nothing special happened, an elf would spend their entire life in their homeland. You could even say the elf race is a tribe for introverts. And so, because she was too curious, Sen kept looking left and right of the market. It ended up giving her a headache and making her dizzy. Wynn suggested that Sen shouldn't look directly into the faces of passersby, because elves' eyesight is stronger than humans, so observing so closely was bound to make her dizzy. Sen was very obedient to Wynn, and even raised the difficulty level by shutting her eyes tight. The result was predictable. She was bound to trip and test the hardness of the road. For sure, how pitiful. The road was indeed harder than San's face. Afterwards, Wynn took San to buy some cooking utensils along with a tent and other various things to prepare for the journey. All those bulky items were stored inside Doraemon's magic pocket. Wynn's item bag. He felt that making this toy was a wise choice. It could carry so many things while being compact and not heavy at all. It was already dark, so Wynn and Sam would find a place to rest first, then get a horse the next morning and get going. The next day, while galloping on their war horse across the grasslands, Wynn asked San to cover her body with a certain amount of mana and maintain it continuously. This was also a special training exercise for San to control that mana, using just a small amount and maintaining it for as long as possible. And indeed, San was incredibly talented at this. It didn't take long for her to master the mana maintenance technique. Even Wynn was surprised that a character other than the protagonist had such an overpowered ability. Although this was a world that Wynn himself had previously created, he was gradually becoming unable to grasp the development of events. Despite that, Wynn still had great expectations for this world. Night fell again. Wynn and San stopped to set up camp at the edge of a forest. After eating their fill, Wynn suggested that he and San take turns keeping watch in case monsters attacked. And if a monster really did attack, they would just use magic and wreck it. Wynn took the first watch, letting San rest after a long day of continuous magic practice. During the night, while Wynn was chilling by the fire, he sensitively detected the sound of approaching footsteps. But it wasn't monsters that were sneaking up, but a group of thugs launching a surprise attack, wanting to rob them. Oh, as if one would be scared of these small fries. He calmly summoned Brother Condor Jean, seeing a bird that was both huge and muscular suddenly appear. The group of robbers knew they had picked the wrong person and immediately turned tail and fled. What else could they do? Just as Wynn was thinking how gutless that group of robbers was, his body was suddenly seized by a sharp pain. making it impossible for Win to stand steady. Jean said that Win had used too much spirit magic in a short time, and if he tried to use any more, he would become paralyzed. Win knew this very well, which was precisely why he needed to get his hands on the sorcerer's ring quickly. The next day, Win and San ventured deep into the forest. This place scared the hell out of San, because the insects here were all as big as fighter jets. Win had to quickly cover San's mouth to stop her from screaming. Otherwise, the gigantic dragonfly not far away would come to pay them a visit. When warned that the monsters in this forest were all ferocious, so it would be better for San to quickly calm herself and avoid alerting them. At this point, the two had gotten very close to the destination of their journey, so they just needed to push on a little more. The place Win and San were venturing deep into was the Sondela Forest, a tropical forest in a magical world. The beasts here grew very fiercely. On average, every one of them was B rank or higher. The environment here made movement difficult. Sin was about to collapse. Win picked a strange green fruit from a tree for the two of them to eat to recover their stamina, but it was surprisingly delicious. Win confirmed that this fruit replenished nutrients very well, which made San even more surprised by his vast amount of knowledge. In fact, that was Win's greatest strength at the moment. But to San, there was nothing he couldn't do. If Win wasn't considered talented, then who was? They were now close to their destination, so Win decided to explain their objective in more detail. Otherwise, Sin would keep wondering. Win said that their destination was the ancient ruins located deep within this forest. Sin wasn't surprised by this at all, because she had never encountered something called ancient ruins before. Ancient ruins are architectural areas with no documents describing them. People believe they belong to a lost era. Ancient ruins are scattered all over the world, but mostly in remote and desolate places. So very few people know their exact locations. Inside the ancient ruins are hidden countless powerful magical items from the previous era, and Win's target is the sorcerer's ring. The item was great, but getting to the place that held it was going to be tough, because it wasn't located on level ground, but was hidden behind a gigantic waterfall. That was also why Win went to the spirit forest first to obtain Brother Condor Jin's ability of flight. Win's plan was to summon Jin to fly them towards the waterfall, while San would create a barrier with wind magic to shield them from the water crashing down on their heads. Hearing that she had such a great responsibility, San got scared. If she didn't do well, the whole group would be swept away. But Win assured her that she could do it just fine, so there was nothing to worry about. San encouraged herself, thinking that her life was saved by Win, so she had to try her best to repay him. Win immediately summoned Brother Condor Jin, who appeared and carried him and San towards the waterfall. And once Win gave the signal, San would cast a wind barrier to shield the group. To be honest, Jin was a little worried. This big bird was proficient with magic, no doubt, but he wasn't so sure about San. Win declared there was no need to freak out. He had been training San for the past few days, so she could definitely do it. Win confirmed that everyone was ready, and immediately ordered Jin to charge straight towards the waterfall. Since simultaneously created a wind barrier to block the water flow, she released such a huge amount of magical power that it even temporarily cut off the waterfall's flow. Finally, Win's group had reached their destination, the ancient ruins deep behind the waterfall. Sin was utterly amazed by the sight of the architecture, which still retained some of its magnificence. And so was Win. Although he knew about this place, seeing it with his own eyes was a completely different feeling. Win's group approached closed. Gate. From here, Jin could go no further, so Win had to be more careful. The door before Win and San was now sealed, so Sin felt it was a real shame. They had overcome such a long journey to get here. Surely they wouldn't return empty-handed. But with Win here, what was there to be afraid of? For a mage scholar, it would probably take about a year to analyze the magic sealing the door, because the magic sealing the door was ancient magic. Without specific knowledge about it, you couldn't do anything. But Win possessed all that knowledge, because he was the one who created this place. Win waved his hand forward, shooting a brilliant, rainbow-colored stream of magic that acted on the door's seal. After straining so hard, he was breaking out in a sweat. Win was finally able to open that troublesome door. To explain the vast knowledge he possessed, Win attributed it all to being a messenger of a god, which was why he was superior. You have to admit, this excuse was really convenient. Sam believed every word Win said without question. Win told Sin not to stray too far from him, or she'd get lost and wouldn't be able to find her way. In the previous era, this ruin was a dungeon, so its paths were designed like a maze. The two of them kept moving forward until they reached a much larger area. This place was very close to where the sorcerer's ring was kept, but getting that ring wouldn't be so easy. First, they needed to get past the golem guarding the door. That golem would automatically attack anyone who dared to approach, so if they couldn't defeat this room's boss, they couldn't proceed. When admitted that this golem was strong, but not so strong that there was no way to defeat it. The way to defeat it was ridiculously simple. They just needed to erase a character on the golem's body, and the thing would be crippled. The big problem was just that Win and San needed to attack first to stop the golem from moving around randomly. Only then could they erase the character on its body. Currently, Win was low on mana after summoning Jean earlier, so the job of magical attacks had to be left to San. After hearing this, San got scared again. Win was asking her to handle a tough customer. What else could it be? If she didn't do a proper job, they'd both be done for. Win just needed San to launch continuous long-range attacks, so the monster couldn't move. Meanwhile, Win would rush in for close combat with the golem, then find an opportunity to stop the golem's movements. Sin still wasn't very sure, but she could give it a try. Thanks to her success in creating the wind wall to block the waterfall, San had become much more confident. Win reminded San to get ready, then took the initiative to step out in front of the stone golem. The golem didn't hold back at all, raising its hand and slamming it down, which made Win freeze in place. Luckily, the attack didn't hit him. Win gave the signal, and San immediately cast a wind blade at the stone golem. But a wind slash wasn't enough to stun that thing made entirely of rock. San automatically switched her attack method. She gathered an even larger amount of mana, then fired a cannon blast straight at the stone golem. This time, there was no way the stone golem could block it. It was immediately stunned and couldn't move smoothly. Win saw that his opportunity had come. He absolutely had to make good use of the opening San had just created for him. The magic San created certainly wasn't strong enough to pummel the golem like pounding rice, which is why Win wanted her to create an opening for him to strike. Decisively, Win unleashed a bursting rain attack straight into the ground, causing it to tremble. The golem, still disoriented, was also staggered by this attack and fell backward onto the ground. Waiting for just that moment, Win immediately leaped onto the golem and then drew his short sword to scratch off the first letter of its name. With just this simple action, the golem was taken out by Win and San. Win was extremely grateful that San chose to accompany him. Thanks to her, his combat was much simpler. San, however, believed it was thanks to Win's dedicated guidance that she was able to perform so well. If the two of them kept being so polite, they would be at it all night. Win concluded that ordinary mages could not have done exactly what he requested. Therefore, San could be proud that she was far superior to the average. Now, there were no more obstacles blocking Win and San's path. They just had to go through the door at the end of the hall to achieve the goal of their journey. Win led San into the room behind the door, heading straight for the chest that was emitting a brilliant aura. Inside that chest was the witch's ring. With it in his hand, Win could now use magic freely without any worries. He had finished preparing everything necessary to intervene in the first major event of the original story, when the first main character dies. Relying on the witch's ring, Win would have enough power to save the princess who was fated to be sacrificed in the original plot. Sin didn't quite understand, before getting this ring, Win had been using magic all over the place, hadn't he? But in reality, he could only use spirit magic. He was helpless with conventional magic. Win had mana in his body, but no mana circuits to channel it normally, which was why he needed the witch's ring. For now, this was just the beginning. Win still had a long road ahead and needed to grind for even greater power. The same went for San. She would need to unlock more of her potential. Suddenly, San was startled, realizing she had no idea how they were supposed to get back outside. But there was nothing to fear. Now that Win could use magic freely, he and San could also get out of the waterfall easily. With his knowledge from the original story and the witch's ring, Win could use any type of magic just by thinking of it. Just then, a mage with his face hidden by a hood suddenly appeared behind Win and San, demanding to know what they were doing there. Win refused to answer the mage's pointless question Instead, he noticed the emblem on the man's cloak and guessed he must be a member of Luxmania. This group was an ambitious bunch aiming to conquer the world. Though not very well known, they had many members. That was only for the present. In the future, Luxmania would become an organization posing a threat to many nations and the main rival to Alan's hero organization. The mage became a little wary upon having his organization exposed. But that wasn't all. Wynn also knew this cloaked man was here to hunt for ancient relics. The cloaked man felt that Wynn knew far too much. It was best not to let him leave here alive. That suited Wynn just fine. He had just acquired a new source of power and was looking for a place to test it. This nameless member of Luxmania had conveniently popped up to be his new punching bag. Being looked down on, the Luxmania mage grew furious, determined to teach Wynn a lesson. While Wynn told San to step back for her safety, the mage cast a spell controlling the mud. An earth, which flew up and shot straight at Wynn with his clay spear spell. Earthen spears tore through the air, rushing straight toward Wynn, but he remained completely unfazed. Wynn originally possessed incredible physical strength, but he was considered a weak character in the original story because he couldn't use magic. However, things were different now. Whatever magic Wynn thought of, he could cast. Just now, he cast a spell to coat his blade with water and easily sliced through the earthen spears. Seeing Wynn destroy his attacks so easily, the mage felt something was off. Wynn humbly claimed to be just an apprentice mage, but choosing a nameless mage like the one before him as a training dummy was still very fitting. Unable to bear Wynn's constant disdain, the mage couldn't take it anymore. He controlled the ground around Wynn, turning it into mud, which then surged up to form a cage, trapping Wynn inside, to ensure Wynn couldn't destroy his magic. This time, the mage added another layer of magic, transmuting the earthen cage into metal for good measure. Wynn had to admit that for a nameless nobody, this guy's performance was pretty decent. He would have to get a bit more serious to show the mage his true power. Wynn enchanted his sword, and with a light slash, the incredibly sturdy iron cage of the mage was sliced open, leaving a huge hole. The mage saw the situation was not good at all, put on a very dangerous act, cast a spell, and then turned invisible. Wynn calmly closed his eyes, enhancing his senses to anticipate the mage's next attack. However, after waiting for a long time, no attack came. Sen approached and told Wynn that the guy had already made a run for it long ago. Wynn wasn't surprised. It was only natural for small fry like him to flee quickly when the odds weren't in their favor. Although Wynn wanted to practice his magic a bit more, his and San's safety came first. Now, there was nothing left to keep them there. Wynn and Sin started to head back. Sin asked Wynn if he planned to do anything else there, because he was heading in the opposite direction of the city. Wynn was a little surprised. San's memory of the path was unexpectedly good. In truth, Wynn didn't clearly remember the correct direction, whereas San, having grown up in the forest, had an excellent sense of direction in this terrain. San was very happy that she could help Wynn. She immediately volunteered to lead the way back. Wynn was very grateful for San's effort, but their goal wasn't to return to the previous city. This guy claimed his sense of direction wasn't great, yet he seemed quite confident in leading them to their destination. Sam was completely confused. Wynn was heading down a path they had never taken before, yet he said it was the way home. How could that be? Because Wynn knew that in the Lost Age, there were means of transportation that no longer existed today. It was even hailed as the reason behind the great prosperity of magic. The thing being referred to was an instant teleportation gate, which was added to the original story when it was adapted into a game. Wynn and San had already arrived at the gate's location, but they couldn't teleport right away. This was because a giant, gaudily colored spider was occupying the area as its territory. Seeing strange creatures intrude into its territory, it immediately shot spider silk from its mouth to attack first. Since it's a spider, why not shoot silk from its rear? This one must be a mutant. Wynn easily dodged the silk shot at him, but Sen wasn't as agile. She was covered in a sticky white substance and bound tightly, unable to escape. Wynn casually told San not to worry. Although the spider silk was a bit gross, it wasn't poisonous. The problem wasn't whether it was poisonous or not. The problem was that San found it disgusting as hell. But the brothers really liked this bondage pose, San. Right now, Wynn needed to make quick work of the spider to free San and enter the instant. Teleportation gate. The spider bared its fangs and brandished its claws, then fired an energy blast at Wynn. But it had no effect, as Wynn had already erected a firewall to block the attack. Next, Wynn sped up and closed in on the spider. then leap high above its head. He'd channel mana to create flames and unleash them straight down on the spider, turning it into a burnt roast. One had to admit that the magic he could now use was quite satisfactory. The witch's ring was truly a top-tier item. Afterward, Wynn freed San, and the two of them entered the small altar where the instant teleportation gate was located. Wynn explained that these were fairly common ruins around the world, but no one knew their true purpose. San was extremely surprised to learn that this magical ruin was an instant teleportation shrine, allowing the activator to travel to other magic shrines across the world. This meant she and Wynn wouldn't have to spend several days traveling back the way they came to return. But suddenly, Sin felt something wasn't right. If this teleportation shrine was so convenient, why hadn't Wynn used it to travel here in the first place? There was nothing strange about that. It was because before, Wynn didn't have a magical tool and thus couldn't use the teleportation shrine. Wynn placed his hand on the stone pedestal in the center of the temple and let his magic spread out to activate its power. He chose his destination to be the teleportation temple near the Celia Kingdom. Wynn now had the right to interfere with the main plot of the original story and was determined to steer it toward the happiest possible ending. Wynn and San quickly returned to the Celia Kingdom in the blink of an eye, just in time for the first important event. Wynn explained to San that countless monsters would soon attack the kingdom, causing it to suffer heavy losses and almost collapse completely. He could confirm this would definitely happen, but the specific timing of the monsters' all-out assault would depend on the king's betrayal. But Wynn wanted to completely stop this from happening, which was why he wanted to return to the kingdom quickly. Once the king's treacherous plan was exposed, Princess Selena would be sacrificed, and Wynn did not want this girl to be sacrificed like that. Just then, someone appeared from behind and called out to Wynn, and this guy even gave a sinister smile upon confirming Wynn's identity. He was the one hired by the Campbell family to drag Wynn back home. Wynn's wealthy father was going crazy at home, having learned that Wynn didn't enroll in the academy and chose to wander around freely instead. But Wynn refused to surrender unconditionally and go back to the family with the guy. Seeing the guy showing signs of wanting to use magic in a crowded place, Wynn immediately turned and pulled San into a run. He just didn't want to cause a commotion here. That small fry mage was not scary at all. That mage arrogantly thought that since Wynn was just a kid who couldn't even get into the academy, how could he possibly escape from him? But he was wrong. Wynn didn't want to enroll in the academy. It wasn't that he couldn't get in. He hugged San, then released magic from the soles of his feet and leaped onto a roof to continue fleeing. The guy tasked with capturing Wynn was completely baffled. According to the information he had, the boy shouldn't be able to use magic. The mage didn't stay stunned for long, quickly enveloping his body in flames and leaping up to chase after Wynn and San. Wynn decided to carry San on his back to escape faster, while San would be in charge of hindering the mage. Seeing the mage launch a massive fire attack toward the two of them, San was startled for only a split second before immediately conjuring a wall of wind to block the attack. While the opponent was still dazed that his attack was blocked so easily, Wynn activated the magic in his feet, forming a pair of small wings that made him move as fast as a speeding arrow, running far ahead of the mage. Already, after a period of rapid movement, Wynn and San finally shook off the mage, but that mage was surely just the first one. There would be many others hunting for Wynn, as his father couldn't have possibly sent just one person. If it came to a fight, Wynn was never afraid of anyone, but the problem was he wanted to avoid trouble as much as possible. Trying to save Princess Selena while fending off the surrounding ambushes in the near future was going to be a real headache. Well, actually, there were many other problems too, one of which was Alan's awakening. According to the original story, Alan would only fully awaken after witnessing Selena's death. Therefore, if Wynn saved Selena, he would hinder Alan's awakening. Choosing to solve one problem would ruin the other, but Wynn was still determined to find a way to solve both. Wynn would make Alan awaken, while still saving Princess Selena. Wynn needed to meet Alan again first. He was currently studying at the Magic Academy, so he should be easy to find. But there was no need to go looking, because Alan just happened to be passing by Wynn's group right now. When San heard that Alan had once been saved by Wynn, she admired Wynn even more, but Wynn felt that wasn't right, as it was Alan who had saved his life. But Wynn didn't want to delve into it. Instead, reuniting with the main hero of the story was more important. Wynn stated frankly that he had something to discuss with Alan and wanted to find a private place to talk. Alan directly took Wynn and San to his dormitory room in the academy, private enough. After exchanging some pleasantries, Alan wanted to know what important matter Wynn wanted to discuss. Wynn got straight to the point, saying that Alan seemed to have grown closer to Princess Selena after the Academy's recent practice tournament. Alan was completely baffled. Wynn clearly wasn't at the Academy during this time, yet it seemed nothing escaped his notice. Sand affirmed that there was nothing Wynn didn't know, and thanks to that, the elf forest was saved in time, and her own life was saved as well. Wynn hinted mysteriously, saying that he even knew the future of the Celia kingdom, let alone these trivial matters. Wynn mentioned that the kingdom would face a monster attack, leading to its near collapse, which startled Alan, who couldn't process this information right away. Wynn also added that in this event, Selena would die. Alan did not doubt Wynn's words at all, because he felt Wynn had no reason to lie to him, and the fact that the kingdom would be attacked by monsters to the point of near collapse was extremely important to Alan. The mind of a hero like him could not accept this happening. Wynn said that they could all avoid the impending disaster, as long as Alan could trust and accompany him. Alan agreed without hesitation. His noble heart did not want the people of this kingdom to be tormented by monsters. Now that Wynn had gotten Alan to join him, the next problem was Alan's awakening of his power. First, Wynn wanted to ask Alan to hide him. He was being pursued by people sent by his father to drag him home. Alan seemed to place his complete trust in his friend Wynn, letting Wynn and Sand take refuge in his room without hesitation. And tonight, Wynn would guide Alan to take the first step. During the night, Wynn and Alan snuck to the Academy's arena. Wynn asserted that the security here would be lax at night, so they could just relax as long as they didn't go too wild and get caught. Wynn also set up a barrier spell to prevent others from detecting them, so he and Alan could be even more at ease. At this point, no one was paying attention to Wynn and Alan anymore, so they could have a comfortable exchange of blows. Wynn asserted that Alan was still ridiculously weak, so he would personally train Alan to get stronger quickly. But Alan didn't think he was still weak. He had won the Academy's magic tournament. This was unexpected for Wynn. According to the original story, the best Alan could do was reach the top 8. It was all thanks to the advice Wynn had left him before, which allowed Alan to control his magic better. Wynn acknowledged that Alan was stronger than he had calculated, but it was still not enough to protect everyone around him. Alan believed Wynn's assessment was extremely accurate, and if that was the case, he was very much looking forward to Wynn training him to become even stronger. Wynn called for Alan to come over and fight, but Alan was not in a hurry. He wanted to see Wynn's moves first, so he told Wynn to go ahead and attack first. Wynn didn't hold back either, immediately launching an ambush attack on Alan, startling him into casting an enhancement spell on his body to dodge the attack. Wynn knew very well that Alan would dodge that last attack, because Alan was compatible with all types of magic. Alan would tend to choose a magic type that countered his opponents to gain an advantage. But right now, Wynn was using light system magic. It had no elemental weakness against other common elements, so Alan was forced to change his strategy. Alan focused on dodging while trying to analyze the attributes of the magic Wynn possessed. And who would have thought that when he decided to counterattack, he would unleash a holy strike? According to the script, Alan shouldn't be able to use the light attribute yet. He was clearly developing faster than Wynn had imagined. However, Wynn was still confident that at this moment, he was still stronger than Alan, so it wasn't a problem. Wynn met the charging Alan with a water sword, successfully knocking Alan down. Alan couldn't believe Wynn was so overwhelmingly strong. For him not to join the Magic Academy was truly a waste. But joining the Academy would only lead to a dark future for Wynn, which was why he chose his own path. Wynn helped Alan up and prepared for the next exchange of blows. Right away, the fun wouldn't stop until Alan could defeat Wynn. Wynn demanded that Alan attack him with his life on the line. Otherwise, there would be no end to it, and Wynn didn't have time to play around for that long. For Alan to awaken, Wynn first needed to ensure he was stronger than Alan, and to make Alan unleash a superior power that could overturn the power difference between them. Alan didn't hold back anymore and resolved to use all his strength to defeat Wynn. But this was not easy at all. Every time, Alan was thoroughly beaten by Wynn. The night passed quickly. Wynn and Alan had been sparring for so long, yet Alan still showed no signs of awakening, only managing to increase his strength a little. But now Alan was stubbornly refusing to stop. He wanted one last round to defeat Wynn no matter what. Wynn could tell Alan was much more focused than in their previous encounters, so he had to go all out to meet the challenge. So, Wynn opened the battle with a fire dragon technique aimed at Alan. Although Alan felt he was inferior to Wynn in every aspect, he couldn't accept being perpetually inferior. Alan unleashed an astonishing power, shattering Wyn's fire dragon with a single sword strike, and even came close to hitting Wyn himself. Before Wyn could recover, Alan was already charging at him with his sword. Wyn felt like he was a goner for sure. But Alan's sword tip stopped right in front of his face. In the end, Alan had fully awakened and won against Wyn in their final sparring match. Alan couldn't believe that such a great power had been dormant in his body for so long without him even knowing. Wyn knew what Alan had just displayed was a physical enhancement power, but it was a unique, premium version, not like the magic of others. Moreover, Alan could also create magic by combining multiple attributes, something only Alan's special genes could achieve. And most terrifyingly for his final attack, Alan had only swung his sword, yet it was enough to tear up the entire arena. After celebrating to his heart's content, a wave of weakness washed over Alan, completely draining his stamina. That final attack was all that Alan could muster at that moment. Alan had truly trained very hard, completely meeting the requirements Wyn had set. When Alan woke up, he was already neatly tucked in bed. He also quickly remembered that he had passed out after the fight with Wyn, but at that time, he was clearly still in the arena. Wyn was standing right beside Alan now, telling him not to worry about what happened before. Alan noticed San was still sound asleep in the other bed and thought he probably hadn't been unconscious for too long. But no, my dear boy, you slept straight through to the next morning. Alan felt like this was a disaster. He was supposed to do something with everyone yesterday afternoon, which meant he had missed his appointment. Wyn advised Alan not to get so worked up. A sincere apology would make everything all right. Wyn was curious about what Alan had to do yesterday, but Alan was being cagey, suggesting it was a rather delicate matter. Based on the original story's timeline, Wyn guessed that the matter Alan was talking about was teaching magic to Princess Selena. If that was the case, Wyn felt it was better that Alan had missed it. For his own good, Wyn suggested that since Alan breaking his promise to the princess was also related to him, he wanted to go with Alan to apologize to Princess Selena. Wyn really wanted to meet Princess Selena, saying he needed her cooperation to protect this kingdom. The issue wasn't whether Selena would cooperate or not, but that she would definitely be entangled in many upcoming events, so she couldn't avoid them even if she wanted to. If Wyn and Alan couldn't help Selena, she would certainly be taken out. If Wyn and Alan couldn't save the kingdom, Selena's death would be a certainty. Therefore, Wyn needed Alan's help to arrange a meeting with Princess Selena as soon as possible. A few days later, Alan led Wyn to a corner of a forest lush with flowers and grass. Wyn said that Selena often came here for a stroll. With Alan's current status, he couldn't just arrange a meeting with the princess whenever he wanted, so they had to wait for a time when she was out to meet her. This place was a small forest belonging to the Magic Academy, the most suitable place for Princess Selena to escape this stuffy castle for a walk. Just then, Wyn felt they wouldn't have to wait long, because Selena was already here. Selena was also surprised to see that besides Alan, there was another person. Here, Alan rushed over to apologize to Selena for breaking his promise to her, but Princess Selena felt Alan must be mistaken. Their appointment was for today. After a moment of embarrassment, Alan immediately put his arm around Wyn's shoulder and introduced him to Princess Selena. After greeting her, Wyn got straight to the point. He had something to tell the princess. The story was nothing new. It was still Wyn being direct about the kingdom being on the verge of being attacked by monsters and almost collapsing. Unlike Alan, Selena didn't blindly believe Wyn's words, but Wyn didn't lose his patience. Wyn guessed Selena had already sensed something unusual about the change in the atmosphere around Prime Minister Clark. At this point, Selena was starting to believe the story Wyn was about to tell. Wyn could recount in detail the shocking event about to befall the kingdom of Celia. Wyn began by talking about Prime Minister Clark, whom Selena was always wary of, stating that he was an imposter. He was currently a mage in disguise. Hearing this, Alan was completely bewildered. Was it really possible to impersonate someone's identity in such perfect detail? Wyn affirmed that it was, and the Prime Minister was a position with a lot of power, enough to bring down this entire nation. For example, he could send a legion on an expedition, leading to a decrease in the number of troops in the city, which would make it much easier for enemies to attack. Selena couldn't believe it, but it was true that the knights were currently being sent on an expedition under the Prime Minister's orders. But this information was supposed to be confidential. Only those close to the Prime Minister would know about it. Yes, this matter was secret, super secret, but Wynne knew about it. So was that enough to prove his credibility? As for the real prime minister, he had probably already kicked the bucket. Hearing this, Selena immediately made a decision. She couldn't stand by and watch this country collapse. Wynne felt that this princess's personality was exactly like in the original story. She was still someone with great affection for this kingdom. Selena wanted to know if she agreed to cooperate. Could Wynne save the kingdom? There was no need to ask. Of course Wynne had this intention. Otherwise, he wouldn't have told Alan and Princess Selena. Alan also vouched for his friend, saying there was nothing Wynne couldn't do. Wynne could affirm that his determination to save the kingdom, to save Selena's life, was further strengthened after meeting her in person. Next, Wynne would lay out the detailed plan too. Everyone in this kingdom would be saved by 3 kids. In a small alley in the capital, Wynne was here to plan a commotion. He summoned the great bird Jean, then ordered him to destroy the surrounding buildings, but not to let any civilians get hurt. Following the order, Jean flew into the air and then appeared over a square where countless citizens were gathered. Next, this great bird unleashed a powerful wave of magic, causing the people to think it was a monster attack and flee in a hurry. After confirming that all the citizens had evacuated, Jean continuously unleashed wind magic, slicing through the air and destroying the surrounding houses. Wynne was very satisfied with Jin's operation and requested the great bird to do the same in other places. Wynne needed to hide, well, so as not to be revealed as the mastermind of this affair, otherwise everything would become meaningless. Jean went on a rampage everywhere. But while the operation was going smoothly, a problem arose. A young boy didn't run in time and was about to be hit by falling debris from a building. Without a second thought, Jean immediately flew over and used his body to shield the boy, resulting in a minor injury to his shoulder. At the same time, a group of mages had also appeared to stop the destructive acts of this evil monster. They simultaneously launched fire arrows at Jean, but these fiery toothpicks weren't even worthy of touching the great bird's body. Jean was not eager to fight and immediately vanished from everyone's sight. Wynne had also achieved his goal and could now proceed to the next step of the plan. Statistics were quickly relayed to the king about a monster suddenly appearing and wreaking havoc throughout the capital, but luckily, no one was injured. The king was relieved that no one was hurt, but he could see that the capital's level of protection was pitifully low. It would be best to recall the knights. To hell with the expedition. However, that Prime Minister Clark opposed this idea. He used the excuse that if the knights were called back midway without achieving any results, they would get angry. The king agreed that could happen, but he had a feeling that something bad was about to occur. The Prime Minister did his best to persuade the king not to overthink it, and to instead focus on figuring out how that monster appeared in the capital. Just then, Selena boldly entered the room, declaring that she knew who had brought the beast to attack the capital, and she also frankly admitted to being an accomplice in this matter. These words made the king's blood pressure skyrocket. Was his daughter too bored or something that she had to go and cause such trouble? Selena declared that she had a valid reason for this act of rebellion. But first, she wanted to summon the person who planned this commotion here to clarify everything. The king didn't understand what was happening, but he decided to hear his daughter out. Selena immediately called for Wynne and Alan to enter the room. This whole council didn't seem too surprised, did they? The capital had been thrown into chaos by these young troublemakers. Wynne entered the room, saying that he had been honing his experience, all to see the true identity of the imposter prime minister before him. The moment these words were spoken, a knight, feeling Wynne was speaking nonsense, drew his sword to threaten Wynne to watch his mouth. But just look at Wynne's face. Does he look scared? The king advised the soldiers not to be hasty. Wynne is Selena's accomplice, after all, so they should just hear out the story of these troublemakers first. However, Clark still had to save some face. The old man declared that he could have Wynne executed for the crime of daring to slander him as an imposter. Wynne ignored Prime Minister Clark's words. First, he wanted to prove he was the culprit of this riot by summoning Jean. Wynne explained that in order to prove Prime Minister Clark was an imposter, he had to cause a ruckus to get a chance to meet the king directly. Wynne didn't deny that he had attacked the capital, but it was all to warn that the fake Prime Minister was planning to destroy the capital, not just for fun like Wynne would. As for evidence that Wynne wasn't bluffing, Clark himself was the living proof. Wynne cast a spell to dispel the magic, causing that Clark to reveal his true form as a short, fat guy. Wynn was all too familiar with the fake prime minister's deceptive tricks. They were all signature moves of the Luxmania organization. The king was also quite clueless, still sitting right next to this imposter to interrogate him about why he had infiltrated Celia's inner circle. The imposter was just as clueless. Instead of taking the king hostage, he went ahead and confessed his goal was for Luxmania to rule the world and all that stuff. But when exposed that the guy was just putting on an act, his real goal was to send everyone here to their graves. Only then did the king order the soldiers to capture the imposter. But this guy wasn't a pushover. He unleashed a death dance move and sent several guard knights to their graves. It's true you can't count on those knights for anything. It's up to the kids to save the kingdom again. It was time for Wynn and Alan to team up and beat the crap out of that imposter. The imposter couldn't believe he could be defeated by the two kids in front of him. He may look lame, but he's the leader of an assassin squad from the powerful magic kingdom of Almaca. The existence of this assassin squad is still unknown to anyone because they always operate in secret. It must be that their identities weren't exposed in previous missions, because with a leader who's such a blabbermouth, it's a real miracle the organization hasn't been exposed yet. Well, in other missions, they always eliminate all witnesses, so no one has ever lived to tell the tale of this organization. Wynn, on the other hand, knew this assassin all too well, because he was the one who created his character. Who else? The assassin didn't hesitate, deciding to jump up and take care of Wynn and Alan, first with his ultimate move, the death dance. Wynn wasn't afraid of a clash either. He enchanted his sword with fire magic, then flew up and slashed through all the attacks that the assassin created. Seeing Wynn completely disregard his magic, the assassin's pride was hurt, and he decided to unleash his ultimate technique. He chanted to release the skill Dark Toll. This was exactly what Wynn had been waiting for. The king, sitting on his throne, started to panic when the surrounding space suddenly turned pitch black. How was he supposed to watch the combat in this darkness? The assassin now believed that Wynn could face him only because he had a weapon that could block the death dance. However, the assassin was confident he still held the winning hand, as he had far more combat experience. This guy didn't rush to attack Wynn and Alan, but first aimed for Princess Selena to strike. But as if Alan would let him achieve his goal, he activated lightning to cover his legs, then moved as fast as a flash to approach the assassin and kick him into the wall. And just like that, Wynn's objective was successful. He had prevented the princess from dying. The assassin was still very confused at this point. He couldn't understand how Wynn and Alan could still keep up with his movements. At this level, eyesight was just for the king's convenience to watch the combat. Wynn and Alan were using their magic sense to track the assassin's movements. What's the use of eyes? Wynn put on a cool expression, declaring the assassin was out of his league if he thought he could fool him. The assassin, being looked down upon like that, got pissed off and decided to unleash his full power to finish everyone off here. Alan wasn't one to back down either, activating his power awakening mode, ready to clash with the assassin at any moment. The assassin unleashed his trump card, crashing down on Alan, making him feel the heavy pressure surrounding him. However, Alan had been specially trained by Wynn. Now, all he needed to do was reactivate the stream of power he had released before. No big deal. Alan focused all his magic power into his sword, swung it, and blew away the assassin's magic, sending it up to shatter the palace roof and fly outside. Wynn declared that the assassin was out of moves and should just surrender. But this guy said hell no, as if he would surrender that easily. He nimbly climbed to the window, then shouted some villainous catchphrase or another. But before he could escape outside, so was already waiting and unleashed a cannon blast that blew him right back into the palace. How could you escape, my boy? When the original author sets a trap, it's bound to be perfect. After smacking the assassin and sending him rolling back into the palace. So also jumped in through the window the assassin had just tried to escape from. But this girl is a natural klutz. She just had to faceplant upon landing. So Hurley got up, then ran to Wynn and praised him, saying he was amazing, his data was godlike. Wynn humbly explained that he had just guarded all the assassin's possible escape routes. It was nothing difficult. The assassin lay flat out on the floor, still unable to understand why things had turned out this way, when he had clearly devised a perfectly flawless plan. Thinking it over and over, the assassin could only blame Wynn for all his failures, because he had ruined his plans, leading to his current predicament. The assassin still had one last card up his sleeve. Although using it would put himself in danger, he had no other choice. At this point, even if it meant betting his own life, he had to take the risk. It was all or nothing. What's the big deal? But unfortunately, the assassin's stealthy action was seen by Win. He instantly flashed over as quick as lightning, then grabbed the opponent's hand and took away a small object. This time, it was really over. The assassin had lost everything. The thing he was about to use was a beast calling bell, a toy that allows one to lure all the beasts within a certain range to gather where the bell rings. According to the original story, this very bell was the cause of the royal castle suffering heavy losses. Although Alan could handle any beast that showed up now, since when had the chance, he might as well destroy that toy just to be safe. At this point, there probably aren't any more plot twists. It's all over. At this moment, Alan also ran over, extremely excited that the operation Win had laid out was a success, declaring him the hero of the kingdom. However, Win refused this title of hero. He felt it was more fitting for Alan to remain the hero. Win explained that it was thanks to Alan's effort that they were able to defeat the assassin, and because Alan was present, the kingdom was saved. Alan, still naive, heard Win say this and just accepted it as such, but added that it was also thanks to Win training him so much. Win still refused to take credit. Without him, Alan would still have become stronger, although there would have been many sacrifices in the process. At this time, Princess Selena stepped forward to praise both Win and Alan as heroes, saying it was painful to watch the two of them humbly pass the credit back and forth. The king, who had kept his butt glued to the throne from start to finish, also acknowledged that without Win and Alan, he didn't know what would have happened to the kingdom. The king bowed his head to Win and Alan, thanking them for their service, but while still sitting down, mind you, seeing the king and all the court officials in the palace respectfully bowing in gratitude. Alan thought this feeling was so awesome. Even Win felt that being appreciated by everyone for doing a good deed was great. After that, the commotion completely ended. In the evening, Win climbed onto the roof of the tallest structure, enjoying the atmosphere there. He silently thought about how he had successfully stopped the threat to the kingdom, and more importantly, prevented the death of Princess Selena. By now, Win could be certain that he could change the outcome of this world. In a world filled with endless wars, there was bound to be countless sorrow and misfortune befalling the characters. Originally, Win felt he needed to stick to living according to the situations he had written in the original story. But now, that was no longer necessary. Now, it was okay for Win to dare to make big moves that strongly impacted the original story. To be sure, Win just needed to ensure he had enough power, even more power than Alan. Win felt that with enough power, nothing was unsolvable. He could absolutely become the strongest person in the world thanks to his knowledge of the original story. Win started to have a thought. Perhaps becoming the strongest and changing the mistakes in the original story was the very reason the author of a series was reincarnated into this world. While Win was letting his mind wander, lost in thoughts so found him. When explained to, so that he was still too excited from having saved the king. So he came out to get some fresh air to help him sleep. As he spoke, he let himself drop down beside Sol was also incredibly excited because she'd heard they were going to be rewarded. However, when Win heard that he would be rewarded, he decided not to accept his share. This completely confused Sol. She then yelled her head off, calling Win wasteful and asking why he wouldn't accept a reward from the king. Win did feel it was a waste not to accept the reward, but his goal was to become even stronger than he currently was. Win was afraid that if he accepted the reward and enjoyed it, his will might weaken and he would rest on his laurels, which would be a disaster. Win decided to transfer the reward to the Campbell family as an apology for running away from home. The next day, Win hurriedly pulled Sol along to get ready to set off. He didn't want to waste a single moment, as there was still so much to do. Just then, the man hired by the Campbell family appeared in front of Win. Win still remembered the man. Did he still want to take him back to his family? However, the mage seemed indifferent and no longer had any intention of capturing Win. The man immediately put on a gloating expression, calling him a fool who had been disowned by his father and expelled from the Campbell family. Win simply remarked, "What bad luck," prompting the mage to mock him, saying that feeling unlucky wouldn't change reality. However, Win didn't feel he was the unlucky one. It was the Campbell family. By choosing to disown him, the entire family had thrown away a unique opportunity to change their fortunes. While the mage was trying to figure out what was going on, a group of royal guards rushed toward them, shouting Win's name. They had already discovered that Win had snuck out. He no longer had time to mess around. and hurriedly grabbed Soul, jumping onto the rooftops to make a run for it. The mage was also curious, wondering what heinous crime Wynn had committed to be chased by the royal guards. But what kind of chase was this? Who would chase after the person who saved the kingdom? The mage froze when he heard this, thinking he must have misheard. It turned out the Campbell family had chosen to abandon a very young hero of the kingdom. A move that wasn't just a loss, but a massive one. As for Wynn at that moment, he was carrying Soul and moving quickly across the rooftops, laying out his step-by-step plan to become even stronger. Wynn brought Soul straight to a completely new land. This place was known as the Dungeon City of Fur. Upon entering the city, Soul looked around and immediately noticed that the number of adventurers here far surpassed that of the previous city they had visited. When explained that this was only natural, as the city was built directly on top of a massive dungeon labyrinth. Therefore, many adventurers were drawn here by the resources within the dungeon. Soul felt that Wynn was like a sage who knew everything. Of course he did. If the author doesn't understand the world he created, who would? Wynn's purpose for coming here was also for the resources in those dungeons. The dungeon in this city was one of the largest in the world. Next, Wynn led Soul to a house he had bought so they would have a roof over their heads. But the house was extremely old and dilapidated. To be honest, Wynn had no other choice. If he wanted a spacious yet cheap house, this old one was the only option. Wynn opened the door to go inside, but the door immediately gave up, falling off its hinges and crashing into the middle of the room. As for the only bed in the house, it was in a sorry state, completely worn out. The house was truly ancient, old down to the very last detail. However, Wynn tried to lift his and Soul's spirits, saying that an old house just needed to be renovated. If they used manual labor, it would take who knows how long to finish. But with magic, it would only take a moment. Next, Wynn found a piece of chalk from somewhere and began to draw a large magic circle in the middle of the house. The house was dilapidated simply because its materials had been worn down by time. Based on that principle, Wynn just needed to use time reversal magic to restore the house to its original state. Wynn cast his magic into the formation to reverse time. Immediately, the entire room was enveloped in a green aura, and the signs of decay gradually vanished, restoring the house to its brand new state. Soul watched from the side, her eyes wide with amazement at the transformation. Even though this was a world of magic, reversing time was just mind-blowingly surreal. After restoring the house to its brand new condition, Wynn collapsed on the spot, startling Soul. Using time magic consumed a great deal of mana, so now Wynn couldn't even lift a finger. Although the house was now structurally sound, it was still covered in dust, so it couldn't be called perfectly new. Wynn had to rely completely on Soul for the cleaning. And after seeing Wynn's terrible condition, Soul immediately agreed. That was all he needed to hear, and Wynn promptly passed out. Soul's eyes welled up with tears, thinking of the mana and time magic Wynn had expended to restore the house. Now, it was her turn to charge in and vanquish the dust. And so, the night quickly passed. When Wynn woke up, it was already morning. He collected himself and looked around, and saw Soul still sleeping beside him. If Wynn wasn't mistaken, Soul had dragged him onto the bed, and how could he possibly be mistaken, since there was no one else in the house but Soul? He had to admit, she could be a bit clumsy at times, but she was actually quite good at taking care of him. After gently stroking Soul's head, Wynn got out of bed to see the current state of the house. Every nook and cranny was now sparkling clean, without a single speck of dust. You could tell Soul had worked very hard. Now, Wynn and Soul had a tidy place to live as they prepared to take the city of Fur by storm. Wynn's specific purpose for coming here was to use the resources gathered from the dungeon, such as monster parts, rare ores, herbs, and so on. With the god-tier knowledge Wynn possessed, getting rich in this place was incredibly simple. Wynn wanted to make the most of his abilities to create all kinds of powerful artifacts, thereby gaining enough power to surpass even Alan. Just then, Soul woke up. Wynn immediately praised her for her hard work in making the room so tidy. And even though Soul had just woken up, Wynn had to urge her to get ready quickly, as they needed to head out immediately. Now that they were in the City of Dungeons, there was of course a top priority task to take care of, which was to go to the Adventurers Guild. After arriving at the Adventurers Guild, Wynn and Soul quickly received their Adventurer certification from the receptionist and were handed ID cards. These are used to prove their status as adventurers, and if they happen to lose them, They would have to pay a fee for a replacement. After Win confirmed his ID card, the receptionist suggested an introductory training course for new adventurers. As soon as Sol heard about a training course, her face lit up with eager anticipation. She didn't have any knowledge about being an adventurer, so the training course sounded very promising. However, Sol's excitement was immediately crushed as Win flatly refused the offer to join the introductory course without a moment's hesitation, as if he needed some introductory knowledge. Win's knowledge as the creator of this world far surpassed that of any instructor. Joining the introductory course would just be a waste of his precious time. Win noticed Sol's disappointed expression, and she admitted that she didn't know anything about being an adventurer, so perhaps the course really was necessary for her. However, Win assured Sol that she didn't need to worry. Practical experience was the best teacher, and besides, she had a sage like him by her side, so there was nothing to fret about. Sol's spirits quickly lifted. Feeling that Win had a point, she asked what their next move was. Win had many plans he wanted to carry out, but in terms of urgency, he wanted to raise his rank first. All new adventurers started at F rank, something even Win couldn't cheat. At F rank, an adventurer gained certain privileges, and the higher the rank, the more privileges they received. Win's goal was to reach A rank, a special grade, which he considered a temporary pass. Sol recalled that they had previously met Dominic, a B-rank adventurer who was considered high-level. And yet, compared to Win, he wasn't even worthy of carrying his shoes, so reaching A rank should be easy for him. It was true that becoming a special grade adventurer wasn't difficult for Win, but he had an additional goal, for Sol to also grind her way up to the special A rank alongside him. At this, Sol froze completely. How could she possibly have the strength to climb to A rank? But Win didn't think it was that hard. If even a guy like Dominic could reach B rank, then it wouldn't be difficult at all for Sol to reach A rank. The only real difficulty was probably Sol's lack of self-confidence. She always thought her abilities were weak. Sol's current strength had long surpassed Dominic's. She just didn't realize it. Just as Win and Sol were about to leave the guild building, the sound of an argument caught their attention. Win felt this was a common occurrence. There was never a shortage of disputes among adventurers. Still, Win was quite curious to see whose drama was unfolding and whether it would be interesting enough for him to watch. In the middle of the association's hall, a red-haired girl was confronting three men standing opposite her, questioning why they had sold off the corpse of the Iron Cannon beast. It had been clearly negotiated beforehand that the girl would get the creature's body. The bald guy, who seemed to be the leader of the men, explained that the Iron Cannon was the most valuable creature they had ever hunted to date, so it sold for a very good price. To compensate, he had already given the girl a share of the money, but he didn't understand why she was still making such a fuss. However, the girl was determined to make a big deal out of it. Hunting the Iron Cannon beast was only successful thanks to her knowledge, so rightfully, the creature should have belonged to her. To be exact, Win, observing from the side, quickly recognized the red-haired girl as the labyrinth chef Carla. Win didn't expect to meet her here, and so soon. He had really hit the jackpot. Now, in the middle of the confrontation, the bald guy complained that Carla was being greedy, and he agreed to increase her share of the money as compensation. But Carla said she didn't need the money. She needed the Iron Cannon to research cuisine made from monster meat. As soon as she said this, the bald guy's two underlings jumped in to object. According to them, monster meat isn't even edible, so using it as a cooking ingredient was a waste of resources. And if Carla kept pestering them, they should just stop working together. She should get lost and make things simple. At this point, the group of men no longer bothered with pleasantries, resorting to thuggish behavior and provoking Carla, saying if she could take it, fine, but if she couldn't, she could just leave the monster hunting party herself. But Carla, being hot-tempered, couldn't win an argument against these shameless men and couldn't be bothered anymore, directly announcing she was leaving the team and walking away. Watching Carla angrily walk out of the association building, Win became even more certain that this girl's passion for the art of preparing monster meat was immense. LY great. Win immediately signaled to So to quickly follow, and of course, they were following the furiously angry Carla. So felt this wasn't a good idea, with Carla's blood boiling like that. How could they possibly talk to her? But Win was handling this, so there was no need to worry. A moment later, Win and So found Carla, who was drowning her sorrows with a drink in a tavern. Wynn walked past Carla, greeting the person who had just caused a scene in the association building and successfully caught Carla's attention. Waiting for just that, Wynn got straight to the point, saying he was very curious about the monster cuisine Carla had mentioned and wanted to hear her explain it in more detail. As for Carla not being in a mood to talk, that wasn't a problem. Wynn would do the talking. He didn't care whether Carla agreed or not. He sat right down next to her as if they were very close. After all, this world was created by Wynn, so he knew very well that monster bodies contain magic crystals, and the monster's body is structured to be suitable for containing those magic crystals. To humans, monster meat saturated with magic is no different from a deadly poison, which is why no one has ever chosen to use monster meat for cooking. This was common knowledge. Any adventurer knew it very well, except for So, of course, who was hearing it for the first time. However, Carla was special because she had a method to extract the magic from monster meat. This assertion from Wynn startled Carla. The other person knew her secret. Monster meat with the magic extracted is incredibly delicious, and it becomes an extremely luxurious cooking ingredient. Wynn only revealed this little bit to let Carla know that he was also in the know. At this point, Wynn had successfully piqued the interest of Carla, causing her to willingly tell him everything she knew. As a rule, the dishes Carla cooked had a great effect in enhancing a person's physical strength. 3 years from now, Alan would have met Carla, and she would have been a factor in helping Alan become even stronger. But now, Wynn had beaten Alan to it. He would make Carla his ally, who would help Wynn become stronger. Carla was extremely surprised. Wynn was the first person to know the true effects of the dishes she prepared from monster meat, making Carla quite curious as to where he got this information. Wynn replied without hesitation that he had once been saved by Carla's master. Once. This made Carla lose her composure. She never expected Wynn to have met her master. Wynn explained that he had once been in a near-death situation when Carla's master appeared and saved his life. It was also at that time that Wynn learned about Carla through the stories of that mysterious monster cuisine master. After hearing this, Carla had no doubts, and she was now lost in memories of her beloved master. Little did she know that Wynn had been bluffing the whole time. He had never met anyone who let him taste food made from monster ingredients. It was all just to build a connection with Carla, to make things go more smoothly later. Wynn then got straight to the point. He wanted to eat monster meat. And not just that, he wanted to eat Carla too. Whoops, I mean all the dishes Carla cooks. Wynn promised to give Carla all the monster meat he farmed, so he hoped that Carla could join his team. Carla agreed immediately without hesitation, as Wynn's promise was very beneficial for her to practice and improve her skills. Just like that, Wynn had managed to recruit an extremely high-quality teammate. As for So, she wasn't paying attention to the benefits Carla brought. She only knew that Wynn had an amazing way with words, able to make a sullen person cheer up in the blink of an eye. Right after that, Carla challenged Wynn to a drinking binge to foster team spirit, and she also learned many more things about Wynn. After that, Wynn also bluffed a bit more about Carla's mysterious master, saying that after saving Wynn, he left immediately to continue his own journey. On the side, So, with her inhibitions lowered by alcohol, got tipsy and started loudly proclaiming that thanks to Wynn, she was still alive. Otherwise, she would have been a goner. That's why So was determined to spend her whole life accompanying Wynn. Hearing this, Carla's favorable impression of Wynn grew even more. Wynn humbly felt that saving So was just a matter of course. He had a principle that if he saw someone in need of help, he wouldn't hesitate at all to lend a hand and save them. Carla was liking Wynn's character more and more, and she was also curious about what brought Wynn and So to this city. Could it also be because of the treasure inside the dungeon, or something? Well, the treasure in the dungeon was part of it. That was one of the reasons that attracted Wynn here. On the other hand, Wynn wanted to become stronger and stronger. One thing was for sure, Wynn knew about the effects of monster meat, so Carla promised that she would do her best to make both Wynn and So stronger. A night of peaceful, unrestrained drinking passed just like that, until the next morning. Carla was horrified to learn that both Wynn and So were currently only F rank. Wynn honestly said that he had only just registered as an adventurer yesterday, but there was nothing to worry about. They would raise their rank very quickly, so there was no need to be concerned. But Carla was still in shock. She began to question her life choices, wondering if she had chosen the wrong people to form a party with. Just then, the men from Carla's previous party arrived at the association office. and seeing Carla there, they took the opportunity to taunt her for fun. They wondered how Carla could possibly enter the dungeon now that she was no longer in a party with them. Carla couldn't be bothered to deal with these guys, declaring that her business was none of theirs to butt into. The bald guy persisted, mockingly asking what rank Win was, and Win didn't hide it, stating directly that he was rank F. This made the whole group laugh their heads off. They thought Carla had become stupid from desperation, choosing to party up with some clueless newbies. What could they possibly accomplish? Although Carla was a bit shocked to learn Win's rank, she still couldn't stand seeing him being ridiculed by those shameless men. Just then, Win took the initiative to speak up. As far as he knew, there was a system for solo duels among adventurers to exchange moves, right? He provoked the bald guy to spar a few rounds with him for fun. Seeing Win wanting to challenge those shameless men, Carla grew worried. She knew those guys were no pushovers either. The bald guy's face darkened. He couldn't believe that an F-rank newbie like Win dared to open his mouth and challenge a C-rank like him. Win's face grew serious as he took a firm stance, asserting that he doesn't like it when someone dares to disrespect him. Unable to take it anymore, the bald guy accepted Win's challenge, thinking Win was being too insolent. However, it wasn't yet clear who was the predator and who was the prey. Win had successfully provoked these stepping stones. He just needed to beat these shameless guys to a pulp, and he could accelerate his rank up by several levels. The labyrinth city of Fur, known as the hometown of the most adventurers in the world, has a characteristic culture called the Blood Duel. A massive arena was erected in the city, and right now, it was packed with spectators. This place was organized to provide adventurers with an official arena to fight for their personal honor, settle personal grudges, and so on, while also serving as a form of entertainment for the masses in this city. Now on the arena floor, the group of 3 shameless men were preparing to face off against Win's group. The bald leader set a condition. If they won, they would take So. Hearing that she had been chosen as the prize, So was extremely panicked. Her legs already shaking so much she had to cling to Win. The bald guy felt that since Carla had left the party, they were now lacking someone to bully, so they wanted to take So to be their slave. So was pale with fear, while Carla was livid with anger at the declaration of that group of people. Only Win showed no reaction, directly agreeing to the other party's proposal. At the same time, he also stated his own condition for victory. The opponents must give up their adventurer titles, and Win's group would become C-rank adventurers. Normally, seeing rookies act so tough should have raised some red flags. However, those thick-skinned, simple-minded guys didn't pay it any mind, thinking they had Win's group in the bag and were now wearing very punchable smiles. Carla hurriedly asked Win if he was sure, warning that if they messed up, Soul would be taken away. But what could those small fries possibly do to Win? Even in a team battle, it was just a series of one-on-one matches. As long as Win's side had one person strong enough to handle all 3 matches, there was nothing to worry about. Carla didn't know the extent of Win's power, so she was still very worried. Their opponents were C-rank adventurers, who had real skills and weren't just for show. Win even asked Soul to try and imagine a scenario where they lost, but Soul immediately asserted that such a thing was impossible. She had never seen anything that Win couldn't handle. For Win, there were far more formidable opponents waiting in the future, so these guys in front of them were nothing. Win even declared that he might not even get a chance to show his skills in this match, leaving Soul and Carla completely confused. The group of 3 thick-skinned guys had also finished their discussion. One of them jumped onto the stage, tauntingly asking who Win's side would send out to face him. On their side, Win immediately ordered Soul to go up and fight, and Soul accepted with fiery determination. Wait, hold on for about 2 seconds. Soul managed to process what was happening and was startled when Win told her to fight the first match. Soul's limbs went weak as she dragged her feeble steps toward the fighting ring. It made Carla feel really sorry for her, but Win was certain that Soul would win, and win easily at that. Noticing the absolute faith Win had in her, Soul managed to regain some of her composure, promising herself to do her best. Win advised Soul not to be timid and to proactively unleash her magic to overwhelm the opponent. Seeing Soul step onto the stage, the opponent felt his victory was assured, and he might even get a little rough. As for the spectators in the high stands, they also felt that the C-rank adventurer's victory was a sure thing. What could a group of rookies like Win and Soul possibly accomplish? Here, only Win knew that the opponent wasn't even skilled enough to serve as a warm-up for Soul. It was just that Soul always lacked confidence in her abilities, so she seemed a bit naive. As soon as the match was declared to have started, Soul's opponent immediately pulled out his weapon, a staff of magic, his morale high as he prepared to brutalize Soul. But Soul remembered Win's advice clearly. She had to strike first to seize the initiative. So right at the start, she cast Gale Magic to get things going. A powerful whirlwind pierced through and shot straight towards the opposing mage, sweeping him up and slamming him against the arena wall. With just a single blow, Soul sent her opponent to the ground, simultaneously silencing the entire arena. As for the two teammates of the guy who just got thrashed, their eyes widened in disbelief at what they had just seen, when asserted that Soul was a genius. So achieving such a feat was only natural, and Carla also understood why. Win had been so confident earlier, even declaring that he wouldn't need to fight. Win spoke up, urging the opposing side to quickly send their next competitor to the stage. But they no longer had any will to fight, hastily putting their hands together to surrender. The battle was too one-sided, and through this match, Soul would probably gain quite a bit of confidence. As for those C-rank guys, they could only feel that they had foolishly run into a steel wall. With this victory, Win's group had reached C-rank, more than meeting the requirements to enter the dungeon. With their current strength, Win's group could reach the middle section of the dungeon without any trouble at all. Thus, Win's group had taken another step forward in their plan to collect the hidden item. The city of Ephor was built on a massive dungeon labyrinth, with up to 100 floors buried deep underground. Inside this labyrinth were all kinds of natural terrains that could appear, such as grasslands, forests, and underwater areas, or even more extreme regions like the edge of a volcano, and so on were all present. Every 10 floors, the geographical environment of the labyrinth would change. This also contributed to making the story the legend of Hero Allen, which one wrote before being reincarnated into this world, so popular. And in the original story, the person who had advanced the furthest in this labyrinth had only reached the 70th floor. Right now, Win's group was on the first floor of the labyrinth, the edge of a basic grassland, which even had a full sky, light wind, clouds, and all sorts of things, leaving Soul utterly amazed when explained that this place was built by an ancient civilization, so it was super impressive. Countless hidden items were also concealed inside, things crafted from incredibly special ancient technology. Carla, at the side, reminded them that obtaining a hidden item was something many adventurers wished for when entering here, but so far, no one had ever succeeded. Of course, that was before Win arrived. He would be the first person to get a hidden item in this labyrinth. However, to receive the hidden item, Win's group first needed to satisfy a condition, which was that they were not allowed to fight a single monster in this dungeon. Carla didn't understand why there was such a strange condition, but Win had no intention of explaining. He just reminded them that if they couldn't avoid fighting monsters, they would be forced to switch to a different plan. Soul had no problem with it. As long as Win said it, she would do it. Seeing Soul's unconditional trust, Carla felt helpless and could only follow Soul's lead. What else could she do? Win confirmed one thing, asking if Carla could also use Gale Magic. If she could, the whole group would use Gale Magic to speed through this labyrinth system. The three of them simultaneously cast Gale Magic, emitting a deep blue aura around their bodies before quickly dashing off. To be precise, Win and Soul dashed off, while Carla was left eating their dust. Seeing that something was off, Carla hurriedly called for Win to slow down a bit, asking if he and Soul were really using Gale Magic because they were moving at a terrifying speed. It was then that Win remembered that while they were all indeed using Gale Magic, Carla only knew the basic version, not the advanced system that he and Soul were using. Besides, Carla's level wasn't as high as theirs. Win and Soul apologized to Carla for being thoughtless. Both he and Soul had undergone training in advanced magic, which was why they could cast Gale Magic at such a terrifying level. They would slow down to let Carla catch up. However, this statement made Carla feel bitter, as if she was much weaker than them. She was determined to learn the magic technique that Win and Soul were using. That part was simple. Wynn didn't mind sharing his knowledge with his teammate. Sol, on the side, saw that Wynn was about to teach Carla, and by some logic, that made her Wynn's first student, right? Which meant she was Carla's senior. Just thinking about this made Sol's face light up with glee. She must really like the feeling of being someone's senior. After that, Wynn's group synchronized their speed, and they quickly passed the edge of the grassland, approaching the edge of the forest. As they were zipping along like arrows through the forest, a few colorful butterflies suddenly caught Wynn's attention, causing him to brake abruptly. Sol and Carla couldn't care less about any butterflies or bees. They were just glad to get a break. Wynn's target wasn't the butterflies, but the cluster of flowers that the butterflies were fluttering around. Wynn explained to everyone that those flowers were a special type that attracted the attention of the surrounding butterflies. He picked a large bouquet and explained that it was an extremely suitable ingredient for making perfume. Hearing this, Carla was confused, wondering why a guy like Wynn would be interested in perfume. Wynn picked a large bouquet in preparation for the next steps. It wasn't that he had any particular fondness for flowers. He just tossed them all into his item bag. Carla was curious about what was so special about those flowers that made them a key item in their plan. But wait, what was more concerning was why Wynn even had an item bag. Wynn nonchalantly explained that he had crafted it himself, leaving Carla stunned. To top it off, Sol chimed in from the side, praising that there was nothing Wynn couldn't do. At this point, Carla finally understood why Sol trusted Wynn so unconditionally. Having collected enough flowers, Wynn wanted the group to get moving again. But Carla and Sol hadn't rested enough yet, so Wynn had to indulge them and let them rest a little longer. In the meantime, he would go scout the surrounding area. After the group had rested enough, they continued to speed through the rest of this forest edge. Because Wynn's group didn't encounter a single monster along the way, they were able to reach the 20th floor very quickly. And the destination Wynn wanted to bring Sol and Carla to was the base of a supermassive, towering tree that soared up into the clouds. The reason they hadn't touched a single monster along the way was so they could climb to the top of this giant tree. Carla immediately started wailing that Wynn had lost his mind. Who would climb to the top of a tree without even knowing how tall it was? But Wynn revealed a secret. At the top of this tree was the Sky Temple ruins. When Carla heard Sky Temple ruins, she burst out laughing, insisting that it was impossible for such a mythical place to exist. She wanted to seek a concurring opinion from the book, but the book didn't think Wynn was bluffing. To the book, once Wynn had determined something, it was certainly true. This absolute faith left Kakla speechless as well. But Kakla saw another problem. Assuming the Sky Temple was real, how was their group supposed to get up there? Surely they weren't going to actually climb. Of course, Wynn didn't have the time to waste on such climbing antics. With a light snap of his fingers, he summoned the spirit gene to his side. Instantly, a powerful gust of wind rose up, and then the human eagle gene appeared before everyone. Kakla was once again left with her eyes wide and jaw agape. She hadn't expected Wynn to know summoning magic as well. Well, with Wynn, nothing was impossible. The spirit gene was their means of transport to the top of the giant tree. Next, Wynn used the spirit language to converse with Jean, which to Kakela's ears just sounded like some sort of hissing gibberish. Kakla felt like surrendering. She was gradually coming to accept the fact that there was nothing Wynn couldn't do. Wynn arranged for Kakla and the book to sit on Jin's back behind him, then had Jean spread its wings and carry them all into the sky. They had only flown a short distance when another event made Kakela's eyes widen in astonishment. A shark was swimming through the air. According to her common knowledge, sharks belonged in the deep sea, so how could there be one in the middle of a dense forest? However, this was no ordinary shark, as a pair of bird wings grew from its body. When it had already known they would encounter a monster blocking their path here, he ordered Jean to accelerate and bypass the opponent. It was best not to fight the shark. The shark caught the scent of living creatures and immediately opened its mouth, filled with jagged, sharp teeth, intending to take a bite out of Jin's group. However, Jean accelerated as fast as a jet, and with a slight swerve, managed to slip past the creature. Wynn's group didn't stop and continued to accelerate. They would reach the treetop very soon. After bursting through a thick layer of clouds, Kakla finally saw the structure she had believed could not possibly exist, the Sky Temple. Even the book, which trusted Jean greatly, was in awe at the sight of such a mystical structure. After landing Wynn's group safely, Jean returned to its own land, not forgetting to tell Wynn to just call if he needed anything. Gazing at the majestic structure before them, Kakla was extremely curious as to how Win knew about a place like the Sky Temple. Win could only say that his knowledge was more extensive than others. Being very perceptive, when Kakla saw that Win didn't want to elaborate, she didn't press the matter. This was one of La's good qualities. She had learned this from her own era. Afterward, Win's group entered the Sky Temple. It appeared to be completely empty inside, making Kakla curious about what Win was looking for here. What Win was searching for was a secret chamber. He carefully tapped on each of the walls, searching for a hollow one. Next, Win just needed to infuse a bit of magical power to open the wall. By this point, Kakla was so accustomed to surprises that she couldn't even be bothered to be shocked anymore. Inside the secret chamber were piles of bottles and all sorts of tools, resembling a rather sophisticated workshop. When confirmed that this was indeed a small workshop, and it was also where he would concoct perfume, which he needed for his next plan. Normally, it would take an entire month to create perfume, but by using magic, the time could be shortened to just 1 hour. When placed a glass vial on the table, then took out all the flowers he had collected in the forest. After he cast a spell, the flowers became more radiant than ever and began to secrete drops of a clear liquid, which collected inside the glass vial. In an instant, the entire room was filled with the fresh fragrance of perfume. To ensure the perfume could be preserved for a long time, when mixed alcohol into the solution of perfume, then added water to dilute the mixture to the required concentration. From start to finish, Kakla and the book could only stare wide-eyed. Win's speed at concocting perfume was just too fast. He didn't even bother using any of the tools in the room, aside from a single glass vial. Using the other equipment might have looked more professional, but Win didn't have time to waste on that, so he skipped it. With the perfume in hand, Win declared that their group's preparations to claim the hidden item inside this labyrinth were complete. And that's all for my video. The above was a summary of the story. If you have any thoughts, please leave them in the section below. The comments. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to get more interesting videos. For now, goodbye and see you again. Bye-bye.